Tell us who you are and the organization that you're with.
Hi, everybody. My name is Conor Malloy, and I'm the Director of Innovation at CARPLS. CARPLS is a legal aid organization that serves, for the most part, the greater Chicago area, and then we have some programs that go up and down state.
Hey, everybody. I'm Jon Davenport. I'm the CIO at Higher Learning Commission. We are one of the regional, or formerly regional, accreditors of higher education in the United States.
Peter Schweiss, I'm the Director of Technology for a nonprofit called Hope Ignites, headquartered in St. Louis, but we have a location here in Evanston.
All right, Jon.
Oh.
Jon, we are going to start with you.
Batter up.
All right. We've talked a lot about the idea of AI, starting with AI, starting small, making sure you get all of those things sort of in place. And for non-technology folks, sometimes we say it's an agile perspective. How, with your organization, did you figure out how to arrive at that thing to start with and then iterate from there? And how do you get sort of group consensus to start somewhere?
Yeah, well, those are great questions. So we knew pretty early when generative AI hit the marketplace that it was going to be a significant game changer. It just wasn't clear how that was going to be. And for us, one of the biggest challenges right off the bat was how abstract it was. As a technology, we kind of grasp it, but in terms of like talking to folks at an organizational level, folks were like, what does this mean? So what we did is we did a lot of research, and we almost immediately imposed some governance elements right off the bat. We set a policy for internal staff, and we said, look, you can't use these tools if they're off the shelf. You can only use tools that we provide, and by the way, we're not providing you any tools today. So stay away from that. Don't use HLC data in anything that you're doing. We made that very clear. We had several, we have a staff meeting every 2 weeks, so we were able to repeat that message a couple of times. But the idea was not to do a permanent moratorium. The idea was to give us enough runway to be able to start to shepherd folks into using it responsibly. We also reached out to our external constituents and gave them some parameters in terms of how they can use AI in conjunction with doing the work that they do for us. So then we invited curious people. We said, hey, anybody who's curious about this, send Jon an email and sign up. I got about 6 people who were brave enough to do that. And we just started pulling them in and teaching them how to use the tools, exposing them to the various concepts that we were also kind of learning about 10 feet ahead of them. And Agile, when we talk about Agile, we can say Agile, and there's all these different dogmas around Agile. But one thing I want to say is Agile is very inherently normal for people. We get up in the morning, if our car has a flat tire, we change our plan, we do something else. We still get to work. So when we think about Agile as a methodology of doing things in the context of a business, the key pieces are doing them in small increments and allowing for failure, creating a safe space. I think you talked about that earlier. Creating a safe space to experiment and make errors is really, really important. So we kept the stakes low. We brought people in who were curious. And then we started to kind of have them apply a little bit of peer pressure. They started sharing out what they were doing in meetings and talking about, oh, I took ChatGPT and I did this very simple thing with it, but it saved me an hour and a half and I feel really good about it and this is why. And taking those use cases, we started to catalog those and then we started to share those out kind of as a progress report, like this is what we're doing. So I think I'm answering your question, I think, which is that we looked at this in an iterative way and we started to build up skills in a grassroots manner. And then as skills were developed, we added to the portfolio of tools that we were offering staff. And we started to increase the sophistication of the types of projects that we were working with on our staff. And we now actually have an active group of staff. Everybody has access to AI. And everyone is bringing to the table what projects they're working on, and those projects that seem to have a bigger lifespan or a larger impact for the organization are the ones that we're starting to elevate now as real projects. We're going beyond just the one individual doing it, but how do we scale these up? So that's really how we approached it.
In that process, how has the leveling up and educating the staff and then their perspective of what to choose as a project to start on. How have those two sort of elevated with each other, or are they still in relationship, or how did that work?
You know, you have runners, walkers, and bystanders, right? So you want to get as many people walking as possible, because the runners are always going. You don't have to worry about the runners. You want to get as many people off the sideline as you can, and the folks who are on the sideline you don't want to abuse. You want to let them feel safe. You want to give them exposure to ideas, and you want to move them in that direction. So what we've done with all of the walkers is taken what the runners have learned and expose them to those ideas. I'll give you an example. Recently, the major frontier models have all released a concept called skills, which is a way to sort of augment information that you're providing the AI so that when you do work in the AI tool, it can actually draw from that information and it doesn't have to be explicitly stated every time. Teaching the runners how that works, they went back, took work they had already built, rebuilt it to make more efficiency out of it and make it more sophisticated, and then exposed the walkers to that, who are now walking around, literally walking around, scratching their heads and saying, oh, how can I apply that to my work? So that's how we're progressing that. It's really not one where we're imposing so much as we're just trying to say, look, this is how this works. These are the danger zones, don't cross them, but here's the safe space to play.
65% of our employees are social workers. They don't want to use a computer all day. They don't want to do case notes. They don't want to do all the crap we tell them to do. But if this makes it easier and they can go work with young people, and that empowers them and excites them in a way. And we're in our strategic plan right now says we're going to triple our impact by 2035, which just started 3 years ago. I thought it was crazy, but now it's starting to come full circle to a point where I could see us growing. I can see technology and AI really fueling that. I think what's unique, I was talking to a colleague like 2 years ago. I said, technology is the future of nonprofits. You were saying earlier how you thought, why would you think any nonprofit would adopt technology as a tool? Now I think without it, we can't continue to do what we're doing. We won't grow without it.
Speaking of, the fun part of that, which is, of course we can't. Of course we need it. But can you afford it?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you budget for it? And so this is kind of for all of you in your roles around, how do you budget for innovation when technology is an overhead expense by all intents and purposes, and most of your board and others see it as a cost center, not a revenue generator, or an impact accelerator, or whatever makes you happy. But, right, we keep pouring money into this thing, or we have to do it and it costs us. How do you flip that to match the enthusiasm that you're all speaking of, that the staff are having with this new tool?
Craig, do you mind if I jump in real quick?
This is for you.
Yeah, great. I want to say first, just kind of along with what you gentlemen have said here, we're not getting rid of people, we're training people for the next round. We're training people for the next decade. So those data entry folks who were most worried about their jobs have come to realize they're subject matter experts and they're AI wranglers. And they're the ones who are helping us formulate what we're going to do from a business perspective. And so it has shifted from they're going to replace me with a customer service chatbot to I'm going to govern that chatbot. I'm going to be responsible for responding to when it's answering the wrong questions or providing weird answers, and I'm going to help shape that. So as long as folks are willing to learn, I think there's really a lot of room to preserve that. And from a budgeting perspective, it is scary. I will tell you that now. From my perspective, I've done some research on this. Probably a lot of you have as well. AI is subsidized right now. So all of the costs that we're seeing are not real. It's very hard to predict what, if I build an AI system today and it costs me, $10 an interaction, will it cost me $100 an interaction in 6 weeks? I don't know. And so one of the things that we have been fortunate with our board is our board understands that even though it's not a revenue center, it is absolutely necessary, as you just said, for us to develop these capabilities in order to be viable in the future. So we're going to have to find a way to balance those cost uncertainties with incremental gains. And I go back to that incremental component. If I can get gains at a small level over time, I can demonstrate over time that I am actually being fiscally responsible while still planning for those things and letting the kind of market settle where it might.
And with that subsidy issue too, right? Like now is sort of a safe place to play and kind of fumble around with this a little bit and be imperfect about your prompting, and maybe you're not economical about some of the infrastructure that you build out because of that. But as you refine that over time, you're going to find it that hopefully the ideal would be then to keep up with that curve when things do start reaching a premium, that you've already cut your teeth on making these models, like the use of these models, a bit more efficient in your usage. So like it's probably a little bit different than we've seen in a lot of technologies, especially with this rapid adoption and scaling this up. So it's a very strange time, and trying to get people ready for it, because I used Claude's new model yesterday, and in 2 seconds, it went up like 5% of my daily usage or whatever, just because, like, for using it for like minutes, right? So stuff gets wild, and it's hard. It's very, very hard to predict.
Yeah, but I don't know if I should answer the budgeting question. Yesterday, I started using Fable, and all of a sudden, I was out of credits, and I just told our board how I think I had it figured out. Our board, we increased our tech budget. Our fiscal rolls over July 1. We increased it by $85,000 this year. And I had to answer for that and say, like, well, what do we get for $85,000? I'm fortunate half my board is big tech, so I don't have to explain what AI is to them. But on the flip side, they ask tough questions like, what are you doing? How are you doing this? So they've given us the grace to mess up. I think that's, when I burnt through $1,000 worth of tokens in a day because I accidentally switched models and didn't realize it, I have the grace to screw up. I don't know how long I can screw up like that, but I have the grace to do it, and our staff does too. And I think, they get that it's going to cost money, and I might not always be able to explain what did we get for that $1,000, but the good things are coming from it, and we will figure it out. But consumption-based budgeting has been hard pre-AI. I mean, when we first moved to the cloud, when we moved like 6 workflows to Azure, they said, what's it going to cost? I'm like, I think it's going to cost this, but if we have a huge uptick in donors because of a breakfast we hosted, then it might cost this. So it's been a challenge for a while. It's not getting easier.
No, I don't see that slowing down, but I also don't think that's any reason not to get in where you fit in and do what you can, and like waiting for it to be perfect or figured out. You might
real quick,
wait
though,
a minute, right?
But that's the thing about like the diagram you had up earlier, right? Where you had that, it looked like everything was just this unidirectional thing, as far as like looking at the risk and then the governance and so on. It's a loop, and I don't want to make it sound like it's a black hole of a loop of investment to be able to put into, but it's something that you work through, and then whether that risk is privacy or your budgeting, that's something that you're going to constantly revisit, because things are changing all the time around these things, and being cognizant of that, it shouldn't scare anybody, right? It should only want to have you invest more and more time into making sure you're doing this right and refining it.
And I want to just add that, one of the things that's really important is to avoid the FOMO, the fear of missing out, that's driving a lot of CEOs to say, we have to do this now. It's a mistake. You don't have to do everything now. You're not going to build a table with a pneumatic wrench. You're just not. So, you have to figure out where AI actually sits in your toolbox, too, because I think you said maybe earlier, there are certain things that just aren't going to fit this model. Don't waste time with that stuff. And if you're starting with the tool, not with the problem, then you're going to spend a lot of money, and it's not going to yield you a lot of value.
I think the sort of hand in glove to this whole budget thing is the ROI that we are going to reinvest to our mission. Oftentimes taking the shape of, or in the words of, the time we save or the time we get back. I have my own feelings around time and what that actually means and whether it's applied, and it's only really a win if you're able to apply that new time to something positive to influence the impact. Otherwise, you just save something one time. How do you do that? How do you continue to, well, you're winning time to give back to your mission, making sure that those that have won this time invest it correctly to keep sort of paying this forward so they're just not one-time wins, to be able to keep this going?
I'll jump in on that. What we've looked at and what we've determined is we're not saving a lot of time. We're just not. I mean, there's a lot that goes into making AI work well and make it work repeatedly well, and to train up staff and to have the tools that you need to have in place and to have people skilling up. So the question is, am I saving time or am I making a better output? And we're making better outputs. So we're putting the same amount of time perhaps into a lot of activities, but instead of producing, I don't know, one widget that looks great or one report that looks great, we're producing 12, and we're using a repeatable process that can then be allow our staff to elevate the work that they're doing. I go back to one of the tools that we're using. We do a pre-analysis of reports, just looks at the structure, doesn't look at the content. Humans are still in the loop determining whether or not, our criteria are met, et cetera. But that waste of time that was the first read is gone. And now more time's being spent on the actual review. So I actually think when people say we're going to save time with this, yeah, maybe eventually. But I think the bigger value is we're going to improve the quality of what we produce and what we deliver.
Our time saving is not with the 65% social workers. My team has been able to deploy solutions faster. So we've saved a ton of time, and I can prove that on the technology side. And to your point, it didn't save any of the social workers any time per se, because they still spent 40 hours serving young people, but they served 10 more young people, 5 more young people. They got them 2 more or scholarship opportunities, whatever it is. Less, and it didn't. They didn't use AI to do that. We used AI to let them do that, and that's been our big enabler. Is it's not everyone can use it, but it's not going to save everyone. There's certain departments that will benefit, and it'll benefit the whole organization, as long as you don't burn through all your tokens.
Yeah, just time. Yeah, time is funky, and I don't want to, really tamp down on that too much. It's still a commodity in many ways, but when I think about it for our folks, we take about 90,000 consultations a year over the phone and through other means. The number that bothers me, though, is while we do that 90,000 and our staff is fantastic, we also turn away effectively by just not answering the phone for about 310,000 people every year, right? And then we're getting people that call back because they need additional assistance, because they have a related issue or something happened after we gave them advice and then they went forward and now they're coming back because something hit fever pitch. I also want to be able to create, companions and assistants for our staff, where if I advise you to go do X, Y, and Z, that I can then dispatch a little AI agent to be able to follow up with you and be like, hey, we advised you to go file this document in court. Did you done do the thing? Yes, no? Well, no, I didn't. All right, do you need more time? No, I just don't know how to do this. Okay, let's bring you back into the loop to be able to speak to a human, right? Rather than waiting for you just to kind of throw up your hands and not engage at all, and then you call us when there's too little for us to do and it's way too late to be able to do it. So we can, for us at least, this kind of gets into the ethics issues as attorneys, is I feel like once we get somebody that comes through our door, I never want to let you go.
Just coupling with that, that's why we banned Otter.ai. We banned a number of other tools. We have a system lockdown on that stuff, and we make really clear to staff where it's safe and where it isn't. I mean, that's a great point.
As far as my org is considered, We obviously have a lot of concerns over PII. People are sharing very intimate details about their lives with us over, a telephonic consultation. One of the things that I've done in talking about like people proposing ideas, I remember when I first started at my org, somebody said, "You've been around for 30 years. You have all this data. You have," and then when I queried it, right, like we have 650,000 cases that we're sitting on with about 1.67 million consultations that relate to those cases. And inside of all of those is this like latent legal reasoning that attorneys are applying in cases that I could mine to be able to like find that reasoning wrapped in prose and then use that to inform, the next generation of attorneys or even public-facing tools, stuff like that. But then again, there's all sorts of personal information inside of all those notes and being able to handle it properly. And, maybe I probably did like a little too much of like a prophylactic on top of a prophylactic, but like, I took it, I de-identified it, and then once I scrubbed that, then I turned that into synthesized data, and then I passed that synthesized data through my Lambda, and round and round it went until it came back, because the PII, for my purposes, didn't inform what we were going to do with that data. That's not the valuable part of my data. The valuable part is the attorney logic and the attorney advice that's being given inside that data as it relates to the fact patterns that are presented. Like all of this stuff has, its individual rules around it, but for the attorneys in the room, like I was on the Supreme Court task force for our state's rules on the use of AI for attorneys. And I'm glad with what we came up with as our work product at the end. And it's a very, very liberal approach to the use of AI. It's very much go out there. You still have all your other ethical obligations under all the different rules that we have spelled out there. But as far as the usage of AI, please go use this stuff and use it to the benefit of your clients. That's the number one aim for that.
That makes me excited to hear usually when we hear liberal usage of something that's innovative, the go use it part is the part that doesn't get added, and it's awesome that was actually the point of it. All right, here's time for questions from the audience, and only if they're real good GC ones. Anyone have any questions? Chris, you got to be good for one. Yeah.
Basic question. So why is it just about what vendors they say our policy next stage?
Yeah, so
Hold on just one second. Did everybody hear that question?
I'll repeat it. So the question is, how do we trust the AI tools, or like, is it based on the terms of service that we look at to evaluate how the level of trust? Is that how a good summarization? Why is it different? Well, I think in a way, one of the things I said when it first happened, and I was talking to our legal team, is it isn't different. At a substantive level, it's the same. We already have acceptable use policies. We already have terms of service that we will agree with and terms of service that we won't. But one of the things that is different is that people talk to AI. And so when people are interacting with AI, they're doing more than just querying it like a database or pressing a button to get a result. They're actually interacting with AI in ways that can expose all sorts of things that they might not even be aware of. And so one of the key questions that we've looked at, and we've done a risk assessment, and we've chosen to accept certain risks. So for example, ChatGPT says they'll hold on to chat history for 30 days at the paid level. If you want a truly private implementation of any of the frontier models, you have to have a contract directly with them. Otherwise, there is no actual guarantee of privacy. So you have to look at the direction, the depth of privacy that you can get, and the level of risk that you're willing to accept, and then build those frameworks around it. Certain systems, like you were saying, are so permissive in terms of what data is collected and taken that they failed to meet our risk level. We were like, no way. But some of them we decided, yes, we can accept the fact that a court can subpoena ChatGPT and have access to chats, just as we accept the fact that a court can subpoena Microsoft and have access to our OneDrive. We actually still maintain a private server on-prem because we have certain documentation that simply is not for public consumption. So you can think of it old school, new school. The old school ways still are applicable in many ways. It's just a question, again, of risk assessment. And again, due diligence. It's so important to pay attention to these licensing agreements because they really want your data. Does that answer your question? Or can I expand more? Or maybe one of these guys can expand more.
Trying to assess how much the focus on AI that you read. I don't know that.
No, think about it this way. AI can transcribe an entire conversation. In the state of Illinois, it's illegal to record a conversation unless you have consent. But I can tell you, I know at least one person who I was talking to the other day who happened to go, oh, and I have this thing that just recorded our conversation. And I was like, what? You know, you didn't ask. He's like, no, but it's helpful. I'm like, it's not. That's actually kind of a violation of my privacy. Fortunately, we didn't talk about anything serious. But that's going to be a risk for us. I mean, think about meta glasses. Think about the fact that people are walking around and you don't even know. Think about the fact, like we had Otter.ai connecting itself to our board meetings. This was a real problem, and we didn't, at the beginning, we didn't have a control for it. It took a couple months before Zoom and Microsoft even made it so you could block it. So we had to rely on our staff to be aware. So I think the risks are in some ways higher, but I also think that they're also kind of traditional risks. They're just risks that you have to kind of contemplate in the context of the fact that it's almost like a constantly surveilled piece of data at some level, a chunk of data. I don't know. I kind of trailed off there. Maybe you can fill that gap in.
Otter is like the worst computer virus I've ever experienced. But the one thing I would add is like my example with Indeed. I read their AI terms of service because before we do anything, I read the entire terms of service. I'm not a lawyer. I don't want to be a lawyer. I don't pretend to be a lawyer, not even on TV. But I've read enough terms of service to know when to ask questions and when to get the smart people involved. And the one thing that really troubles me about Indeed and all these other ones is when their AI use policy is very boilerplate. It looks like ChatGPT wrote it. And at the end it says, we use OpenAI as our LLM. Refer to their terms of service. So Indeed read that and wrote that today. OpenAI's terms of service changed tomorrow. All of a sudden, I'm now legally governed by that next, you know. So you have to follow that trail and read the documents and actually like dig into the terms of service more so than ever. And I've always been someone that reads the whole thing before I sign it. When I bought my house, I read all 2,000 pages of the mortgage document, you know, because you have to know what you're getting into, and especially in this day and age. I think your paranoia is well-founded, and I think it's good, healthy, you know, challenging what's going on and figuring out where your risks are.
Well, thank you guys, and please help me give them a round of applause and say thank you.